Now, this is one of the most grounded Spider-Man films we've had in years. But is Brand New Day good for the MCU? Let's talk about it. Spider-Man Brand New Day picks up right after No Way Home, where no one remembers who Peter Parker is. But rather than delve into a larger multiverse adventure, this film decides to tell a smaller, more compact story about Peter Parker as a person. He must try to rebuild his life as Spider-Man while also trying to find himself when no one knows him and he's completely alone. So right off the bat, this MCU film is one of the best Spider-Man films because it focuses on Peter Parker instead of large spectacle that distracts from the story. But with that out of the way, let's go into what works here. And the biggest improvement here is how grounded everything feels. This film truly feels like a Spider-Man movie again because he's not paired with anyone that overshadows his importance in the narrative. In No Way Home, we had Doctor Strange. In Homecoming, we had Iron Man. And in Far From Home, we had Mysterio. But here, I would argue Spider-Man is the lead character in his own story. This film also follows the consequences of the previous films really well and makes us feel bad for Peter. Watching him try to navigate a world where everyone that he knew and cared about doesn't know him is kind of sad. He's just a wandering guy. This gives the movie an emotional weight that the other previous films didn't really have. And I would argue that this film is the closest we've gotten to a classic Spider-Man comic from the 1960s. It lets the story breathe, and that is a great thing. Another huge strength here is that the film leans into Spider-Man's rogues gallery. Seeing this variety of Spider-Man villains inhabiting New York City makes the city feel lived in and real. I really loved seeing Scorpion and Tombstone amongst other villains, even if they didn't have all that much screen time. Speaking of New York City, the NYPD plays a big role here, and it actually feels like Spider-Man cares about his city and the people who live in it. These interactions with the police are something that I really missed from the previous entries, and we get a lot of that here, which is great. And we need to talk about one of my biggest surprises, which is the Punisher's role here. I was a little worried he'd be a little bit toned down and his character would change a little bit as a result of being in a Spider-Man story, but no, they pretty much preserved his grittiness and his strength. He does naturally integrate into the story without just feeling like a cameo. And I began to really care about the relationship between Punisher and Spider-Man, which I've never really cared about. Now, as seen in the trailers, Spider-Man gets organic webbing. The transition between web shooters to organic webs is actually fairly well executed. This doesn't just happen, it does feel earned, and it feels like Spider-Man is at a point in his journey within this Tom Holland iteration that this should happen. Now, we must talk about the heavily guarded secret of who Sadie Sink is in this film. Without going into spoilers, she is fantastic here. Her character reinforces the theme of loneliness and trying to find yourself when no one else knows you. She also serves as a connection to the broader MCU and the direction that these stories are beginning to lean towards. That's about all I can say. An incredible action sequence featuring the Hulk also happens here, which I really like to see. It really reminds you of how scary and imposing the Hulk is, especially after seeing more watered down versions of him, like Professor Hulk. And it also allows you to live the fantasy of if Spider-Man had to fight a giant green monster. When tackling Peter's relationship with MJ and Ned, the film decides to take a really mature direction that I appreciated. Neither storyline takes the easy way out, and it does feel like a natural continuation of how these things would play out. And finally, I know that a couple people are saying that the ending of this film is a little underwhelming, but I would argue that it really fits the structure of this story and what this film represents. It commits to being a sole Spider-Man story instead of really connecting into broader MCU issues. Now that we have all of that out of the way, let's talk about what didn't work here. And my biggest issue here is that this story has been told before. In fact, it reuses several iconic scenes from the Raimi trilogy with just Tom Holland sprinkled in and with new paint. Some examples are Peter discovering he has organic webbing, MJ being with another person, and an upside-down romantic scene. Instead of feeling nostalgic, I just felt slightly annoyed that this film couldn't find any other way to tell this story. The whole spider puberty subplot also felt a little cringy and just didn't entirely work for me. I understand sort of what the writers were going for, but a lot of the attempts at humor just wasn't very funny. A few supporting characters here also don't get enough development, and one of them has a big surprise plot twist that I saw coming from a mile away. The inclusion of Bruce Banner is also a weak spot for me. Although the action scene was fantastic, I don't really think that the Hulk was necessary to be in this story. The role only exists to introduce a device that Peter uses later, but it doesn't really go anywhere once that moment happens. Remove that subplot and very little will actually change. The main villain here is also somewhat disappointing. They're serviceable, but they never really felt intimidating or a threat to Spider-Man. This is especially compared to some of Spider-Man's most iconic villains, like the Green Goblin. Instead, they serve more as a solution to many of the problems that Peter encounters during the runtime of this film. And while Sadie Sink gives an excellent performance, I feel like this role could have been introduced in a number of MCU projects where it would have felt better. Again, not giving away what character she is, but to put that character with Spider-Man is a choice, but is it the right choice? Time will tell. It just felt a little bit forced. So you'll probably really like this if you like character-driven Spider-Man stories and want to see where Tom Holland's Peter Parker goes next. But if you're looking for more of a big spectacle film like No Way Home, you will probably leave the film pretty underwhelmed. This is smaller, quieter, and much more personal, like Raimi's Spider-Man 2. But overall, Spider-Man Brand New Day proves that Spider-Man can exist within his own story. It's heartfelt, grounded, and really gives Peter Parker the attention he deserves, even if it's full of recycled scenes and a couple of underwhelming characters. On the caffeinated scale, I'm going to give Spider-Man Brand New Day a damn, that's a fine cup of coffee. So what did you think of Spider-Man Brand New Day? Please let me know in the comments section down below. Also, what's your favorite Spider-Man film? Let me know in the comments section, and I will continue brewing new reviews for you very soon. I'll see you next time.